Hey folks, Bruce Parkman here. Welcome to another episode of Broken Brains, sponsored by the Mac Parkman Foundation. Here on Broken Brains, we're focused on the issue of repetitive brain trauma and the impact it has on our children, our veterans, and our athletes. And every week we reach out to amazing people that come on and provide their stories as authors, as researchers, as scientists, as parents, as athletes, as veterans, because as a population, we are completely unaware of what this does to our brains and how it's impacting the mental health of our society. This is the most under-researched yet largest preventable cause of mental illness in this country, and we need to know more about that. And that is why today we have Miss Katianne Olson, who's a Amazon best-selling author and a special education teacher, who unfortunately became involved with this when her husband suffered a TBI, and she had to work through that with her husband. She ended up writing a children's book on this issue because children are absolutely impacted either by this phenomena or by their parents who have suffered this, and the psychological and behavioral issues that come about when we have a damaged brain. And she's an amazing resource for information on this issue, and she's obviously lived through it herself. Ms. Olson, I cannot thank you enough for coming on the show today. This is amazing.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, no, I'm super excited. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Cool, man. Well, let's dive into it. So, I mean, obviously you wrote a book. You're an Amazon best-selling author. Is this your only book, or are there other books out there?
This is my only book.
This is
I joke
book.
that it's the book. It's my baby. Yeah, my third baby. Yeah, so it's my only book right now. It just came to fruition through our own family experience, and it was a
Right.
desperate need in children's literature. And I quickly realized that when we were navigating as a family, my husband's traumatic brain injury.
So talk about that. As much as you want to, about your husband.
Yeah.
So he had a TBI.
Yeah, so
And then,
he was cleaning gutters, and unfortunately, the freak accident, he fell from a three-story roof onto
oh,
concrete, and had a pretty severe traumatic brain injury. And it was really touch and go for a little bit, and we really didn't know what was going to happen. So I got the phone call no wife ever wants to get. You need to get to the hospital now. This was back in the height of COVID too, so we had to add
oh,
that whole element of not being able to be at the hospital together. But yeah, so it was a pretty scary time, the unexpected phone call, and that many of us who are navigating traumatic brain injury with ourselves or our loved ones get. So it was a scary time for our family.
wow. And so when obviously, how long did it take before you got your husband back home after? I mean,
So, it's really remarkable when you talk about everyone's unique journey navigating traumatic brain injury. You hear the stories of miracles often throughout, and then you also hear the stories of those who weren't so fortunate. My husband was in the ICU for 10 days at a level 1 trauma hospital before he was transported to Shirley Ryan Ability Lab in downtown Chicago, which is the #1 rehab in the world for traumatic brain injuries. And it's just an incredible rehabilitation hospital. And when we originally had the intake meeting, they were kind of preluding to, roughly about 4 to 6 weeks. We won't really know until, we get him here and assess him and kind of see how he's progressing. And he came home in 11 days on our son's first birthday, which was remarkable. We weren't expecting that.
what a
And
gift.
then, yeah, it was a very bittersweet welcome home. You're celebrating your son's first birthday, but you're also celebrating life, and being able to come back home to your house it was emotional. But then he came back in June. So his accident happened in May. He came home in June. And then he went to what they call day rehabilitation, which is basically Monday through Friday, 9 to 4, intensive speech, OT, physical therapy, pain management therapy from basically June to September. So beginning of October. So he had a very remarkable recovery, and we are grateful for the level of care that he was able to receive, because it was no messing around. It was, we're going to business, we're getting you back, and it's going to take a lot of work, but they were really remarkable.
That's great to hear because when we start dealing with TBI and just the amount of pain and the impact on the family, a lot of times that's complicated by the quality of care and
Yeah.
the lack of knowledge about, what's going on inside the brain, because we can't see that, right? A lot of the,
Mm-hmm.
the assessments that we make are kind of, swags based on, MRI or whatever. So, I mean, I'm so thankful that, your husband made it back. And so what, you have this miraculous moment. My dad walks through the door, your son turns one, you got one candle on the cake. How was the journey after he got back? I mean, was there any
Yeah. And
complications? I mean, usually there are some, some issues that, because the care for a TBI of that magnitude is usually long term for a while.
yeah, and we were very privileged, and I feel like it's super important to address that we were very privileged in having remarkable medical care, and we had that village of the medical side alongside of us, along with our friends and family to help support us. Um, it was also during COVID, we were social distancing, like it was really a hard time of just our whole
Six
world was
feet.
navigating it. So here you are supposed to be isolated in a time where you need community so significantly. That added a huge element, but we were fortunate that our community said, no, we're here, we're alongside you, and we're not going anywhere, which is really, really great. I think it's your first year in our journey was you were just excited and thankful and grateful to be home and alive, and your mindset as a family, and I think I don't want to speak like for my husband, but your focus as of what do I need to check on my rehab list or journey to get better, and what therapies do I need to do, what new holistic therapies could I do to make me feel better, and put the hard work in. And I think those first years or months, you're kind of just dedicated in your recovery of what are the check boxes per se that you need to check off. But I think as you pass year anniversaries, you realize there are some things that a checkbox can't fix anymore. And this is kind of the new norm that you're going to have to navigate, of fatigue and exhaustion, and just knowing when you had a stamina before and you were able to do things at a high level, and now you're having to be humble enough to say, okay, I need to take a rest, or I overdid it. um we have two young kids, so we're running around, being young parents as it is. So I think it's just giving yourself that space to process that your life has changed, and there's grief that comes along with it, there's gratitude, there's a whole plethora of emotions that go through this. But then you're kind of then tailoring off into your own individual journeys too, social emotionally, physically, mentally. And this, how do you then come together with those own unique journeys of your own past, and how do you kind of navigate, okay, this is what our life's going to be like, and how are we going to navigate that?
And I think that's where we're, our paths are crossing away, because we're coming across so many ways to treat the brain that are not basically, they're not out there in the medical
Yeah.
field. I mean, when we deal with TBI clinics, we deal with the military, you get 3 weeks of amazing care, but then you go
Mm-hmm.
home to Nebraska, to Omaha, wherever you live, right? Chicago, right?
Mm-hmm.
And brain health is not a prioritization in this country, right? And so we do not have scalable, repetitive, long-term brain health that looks at a lot of the modalities that are out there, from brain supplementation to all the technical modalities that are out there that can assist brain healing and health. And
Mm-hmm.
so it just seems to me that when people they have their TBI and, hey, I'm alive, it's good, the medical community is like, great job, we did our job, now go home. And
Mm-hmm.
then we're on our own. We're on our own when it comes to, what do I do for the rest of my life? Because
Yeah.
you don't have to accept fatigue. You do not have
Yeah.
to accept these things. We have so many ways, because the brain, even though it's been harmed, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it can regrow. It can it can heal. It can continue to get better. We have to, challenge it. What have you on the journey right now? What are you looking at as far as post acute medical care to assist with the improvement of your husband's brain? Has he tried anything in the
Yeah.
psychedelic
So
space?
we actually, when he came home, he was obviously in an intense amount of pain. And we
Right.
were doing, I don't know if you've heard of salt cave therapy and dry floating. That was
Okay.
crucial for him in those early weeks. We were going to do salt cave therapy and halotherapy. And basically and dry floating puts you in sensory deprivation, and you're basically floating without getting wet into it kind of looks
I
like a
think you
water
broke
bed, a
up,
nice warm
Katianne.
water bed, and it just kind of takes pressure off your joints and your
Okay.
pain. And it just allows you to just let your brain rest. And it was remarkable. I really truly feel like in those early weeks, it was huge for him to just have a space where his brain could shut off and just quiet and heal.
Right. I
And
bet.
really just, he fractured his shoulder too, so he was in an intense amount of pain. I mean, I remember us first
Ow.
walking in, um and we were like, he couldn't even open the front door. Like, he was just in immense amount of pain. And over
Dude.
time, it really, I do feel like, helped just give his body the rest he needed,
Mm.
and just to, you know, turn his brain off from what just happened to me. I need to get home to my kids and my wife, to how am I to get back to work, and just kind of just taking all those thoughts spewing through his head, and just giving him a time to just rest and let his brain, work through, rebuilding his pathways. So I do think I recommend it to anybody. I know there's not a lot out there yet, but you're right. There's a lot of out of the medical world therapies that are out there that we so happen to, just a friend knew that she just opened up this new salt cave and she had this available, and she was like, hey, I really think this would help. And we were very fortunate, but it was really, there is a lot out there. Hyperbaric chambers are really big right now, red light therapy,
Absolutely.
and it's hard because you have to be sure that you are still going to the right people who know what they're talking about. Because I think there's
Right.
big buzzwords that come out and everyone's like, oh, all this red light therapy is equivalent, or all these hyperbaric chambers are, equal. So I think there's a balance of making sure you're really finding the right people, and that they're well versed in brain injuries, and making sure that, it's a best fit for you. But yeah, there's a lot out there. But it also, it falls on the caregivers and having that network to know what's out there. So yes, I spent many nights researching.
And that's the point. That's what we tell people, is that you are your best advocate for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
your husband, or your child. And without
Yeah.
the research, I mean, so many things that we're finding out right now that we didn't know when our son took his life, that are out there that can improve brain health. And besides what we know the root causes are. Well, obviously, this journey has compelled you to not just share your story, but to educate and create awareness.
Yeah.
So where did you come up with the idea to write this amazing book?
Yeah. So we were in the rehabilitation hospital, and I was just browsing through the Life Center library, and I was trying to think of ways, the night I came home from the emergency room, my daughter was almost 4 at the time. And I remember just sitting there that night being like, how am I going to explain this to her? And I'm very well versed in disabilities, right? That's my career, and I sat there looking at her being like, how am I going to break this down for an almost 1-year-old and an almost 4-year-old, of dad's not going to be home for a while. And I remember being like, okay, children's books. Children's books and literature is so powerful, and even adults take away great messages from it. And I was up all night on Amazon and in our public library being like, books about brain injury for kids, resources for brain injury to explain to children. And I kept hitting these dead ends. And it was that moment where, when we got to the rehabilitation hospital, I was like, here I am in the number one rehab hospital in the world, and I'm at their library, and I went to his doctor and I was like, there's nothing out there for kids. And I remember the resident looked at me. He goes, yeah, it is a really big need right now. He goes, and I'm like, well, that's got to change. And he looked at me, he goes, you'll do it. And I looked at him like, right now, like, no way. But I think in that moment when I had my own conversation with my kids and realizing the desperate need for representation for this, it was that aha moment of like, I mean, the statistics alone, 2.8 million, which I think is even grossly underestimated. People go through this yearly. And I'm like, I can't be the only one who has been in this very exact moment and kept hitting dead ends. So, I waited a little bit because I felt it was right for me to not write the book in that moment. I waited a couple of years to kind of see what did life look like, post rehab and once you leave the rehab hospital, and kind of what does that norm look like now a couple of years post. And I felt it was time. I felt like I had enough lived experience to kind of see the whole gamut of the experience. And yeah, I looked at my husband. I said, hey, I really think I'm being led to do this. And he's like, let's do it. And he's supported me 100% of the way with it. So yeah, it's been a wild journey, but I wouldn't change it for a minute.
So tell our audience, what's the book about?
Yeah. So
the
Resilient Brain, it's a children's book, but I really say anyone can benefit from it. So it really goes through what a brain injury is, how it can happen. We talk about the different parts of the brain and what those parts control. And then also if it gets hurt, that section, what they might have difficulties with. We talk about feelings that you might have seeing someone go through a brain injury. And just talking about the rehabilitation process, it goes into different therapists, like physical therapists, occupational therapists, and kind of the rehab journey and what that might look like. And really the biggest message is just how to be resilient and how to come together. And most importantly, hope, because I think a traumatic brain injury can bring so much darkness. And I was very intentional on how I designed it because I wanted the book to be bright. Because I think when you're in that moment, you hear so much of like, we don't know how your recovery is going to go. And you hear all those hard conversations of unknown. And I really was intentional to design the book to give families and children and anyone navigating it that the brain is powerful and it can relearn things, and it's scary, but there's hope on the other end of it. And really, it's just, I say it's a guide. It's kind of for someone to literally, if they're going through it, to know from A to B, kind of the whole gamut of traumatic brain injury and what you need to know and how you can come together and overcome it.
I just noticed you have the right color shirt on today, so that's really
It
cool.
is.
Yeah,
Me too.
yeah, love it. So no, but what I think would be great is right now we get a lot of calls from parents that are trying to talk to their kids about not playing contact sports, and the kids are into it. Now we all know that this is not healthy. It's not healthy for children with developing brains. We're losing way too many kids. It's the largest preventable cause of mental illness in this country. Mm-hmm. And when you're talking to Johnny, who's got to play football, or Susie, who wants to head soccer balls, right? Or girls that want to play contact sports with boys, and the parents are trying to get the point across that I love you and your brain is all you have. Mm-hmm. I think your book could be a remarkable prop for them to communicate the value of their brain and why we have to do a better job taking care of it. Because, and they ask me, okay, yeah, that'd be good. We have had, we get calls all the time from parents like my child who we love our kids, man. And when they want to do something, we want to say yes, right? Mm-hmm. But here's something they want to do because their friends are doing it or the coaches have asked them, in our son's case, right? And they're like, but how do I say no with love? And part of it, we tell them is try to get the point across to their kids that you're not going to be a child forever. I mean, sooner or later, you got to grow up, which is, my son was always trying to grow up. Said, look, man, you're going to be an adult for the rest of your life. Be a child as long as you want. Right.
Yeah.
So,
and it's a great point though, because I think, I will be fully transparent. it took my husband's brain injury to be serious about helmet wearing and when I'm riding a bike. And it took me to see my husband literally navigating a brain injury to seeing his brain and the ripples of his brain on this huge, massive TV for me. I mean, I will be honest, I even took for granted my own brain and until we had to go through this, because I think it's so innate to just keep going about your day and not really realizing your brain is literally letting you be the reason why you're up and breathing and walking every single day. And it, unfortunately, like, it took me to be like, nope, if you're riding a bike, you're wearing your helmet. And even for me too. You know, and I think until you're in that situation where you're seeing your brain not work like you knew how it used to, or watching someone that you love look at a black and white picture of an animal and not be able to say what it was, it makes you be like, oh my gosh, you don't realize that. And I think, you know, it definitely has changed my perspective. You know, I love sports. I've been an athlete my whole life, but yeah, it's changed my decision making of what I allow my kids to do now from a contact sport um aspect. And yeah, and I think my kids now understand that because they've seen their dad go through that and they know how important protecting our brain is now. But it is a hard conversation because I don't think there's enough out there. You know, teenagers don't want to wear a helmet. They want to look cool. And, you know, they don't want to be the, you know, the nerd who's wearing a helmet on their bike or on their, you know, now their electric scooters, which those things are, you see kids, you know, adults are like, these things are mini motorcycles. But, you know, I think my kids now yell out the window, put your helmet on. Like and unfortunately it took this experience for them to really, you know, advocate for that, you know, for themselves now. And I wish it didn't have to be that way, but I do think it's a bigger conversation of, it's hard for you to see it now, but I'm doing this out of love and protection because, you know, it's not that there's just so much out there that could happen, but it's a balance, right? I'm not going to put my kids in a bubble. They are going to continue to do things in their life and be in sports. But, you know, here's the thing. I could be walking across the street and get a brain injury and there's nothing I can do about that. But I think it's important of being conscious of what you're willing to allow and what you're willing to balance and making sure that you're educating kids young and early on why it's important to protect your brain and just reminding your brain is the reason why you're breathing, you're walking, you're reading, you know, you're talking. Everything. And I think we at times all forget that. And, you know, I think it's an important conversation for families to start having, especially early on. And I hope the Resilient Brain can do that. It's not only for those navigating traumatic brain injury, but also it's an awareness piece.
It is.
I think that's equally just as important too, of not only supporting families who are going through this, but also how do we build awareness around this invisible injury and give it representation that it needs on bookshelves for these conversations to start happening, even for the youngest of readers.
And I think one of the things that you're bringing up is that when you said, hey, I took my brain for granted, is that we all do. And, you know, and when it comes down to contact sports, we can control, you know, the exposure that those brains take. And we know it's not healthy. And that's why we're pushing parents to go brain safe sports. Nothing wrong with sports. Hell, I'm 63. Yeah. I'm still playing rugby. I'm all about smacking a dude. But I didn't start till I was 29. Right. Yeah. But we're, you know, what we are doing to our child's brains is now becoming understood that this, I mean, you know, these kids that are in high school and college, sorry about that have played, you know, football for 15 years or hockey or like my son, wrestling and football and all this stuff. You know, we're just a little bit too crazy about the sports, but we need material that outlines the fragility and value of that brain. To your point, how important, I think we're talking about a whole nother children's book here on, you know, repetitive contact sports, repetitive impacts, or how vulnerable is your brain? Why do you need to take care of this brain? You know, because it is, you know, it defines everything that we become and everything we are. And, unfortunately, we meet so few people that can turn tragedy into good, right? Into a lesson, right? And you've had a lot of blessings, obviously, on your journey from the level of care to, obviously, it sounds like your husband came back, to, you know, and is back, right? Instead of, you know, some of the more unfortunate, you know, stories that we hear, and I'm so thankful
100%.
for you. But
Thank
for you
you.
to take that and turn it into a book to educate and aware, I mean, is amazing, because you're right. We don't have, I mean, I had to write, no kidding, the only book on contact sports for parents in my
Hmm.
grief. I
Yeah.
read 200 pages because I did not know you couldn't play back-to-back contact sports. I thought it was all about the helmet and the pads and the whole 9 yards.
Hmm.
And what we're understanding now is that even after a TBI, whether your child has a concussion, nobody in this country is going back 30 days later to see if you can do a post-concussive survey, a
Yeah.
PCS. It doesn't take place yet. It's recommended by doctors or whatever, and parents are like, he's cleared 2 weeks, back on the field, buddy. Let's go, man. Rah rah rah.
Yeah.
And we're not prioritizing the brain. I mean, it's just I think that's where, in your opinion, I mean, like the doctor checks your heart when you go in for the you do the annual physical. They check your heart, they check, your kneecap, they tap your kneecap, they check your
Yeah.
lungs, right? This makes all
Yeah.
this work, right? What are we
Exactly.
doing up here? When are we going to start taking a look and asking questions? Hey, have you had any head injuries? Do you get hit in the head a lot? Contact sports,
Hmm.
domestic abuse. We,
Yeah.
by prioritizing brain health, what we could do to incarceration rates and recidivism and all these other social ills that we have right now, it can impact all of that. And you're helping us out because
Yeah.
there's just
You bring a great point up, because I think, you said in your grief you wrote your book, and I think for those who have navigated this, I think in some sense this book was healing for me, because I brought so much of those feelings of sitting my two kids down, and I didn't want anyone to have to go through that. And was well educated in disabilities, and I knew these therapists, and I knew kind of, I was on the other side of the table of these meetings instead of being the one leading these meetings. So I was fortunate to have that career exposure. But I thought, man, people who don't have that, where do they even begin? If they don't have a team who's having, you know, a team meeting saying, hey, let's go over these scans. Let's go over what the schedule looks like. Here's the reasons why we're doing X, Y, and Z. And here's kind of the long-term goal. I mean, we were so lucky to have that. And I never wanted anyone to feel speechless like I did, because I thought, man, this is so common, and how was there nothing out there? And I think a sense it was my own way to healing too, of just, it's not easy to be resilient, and it's not easy to, rah rah, this is great. I mean, there are still hard times. There's times where, I've looked at my therapist and I'm like, I don't even know how I got through this, because I think there's so much power in vulnerability. And I think it's important to also acknowledge that, yes, I've been able to do this and turn this massive spin around, but it hasn't been easy either. And then that's okay. And nothing about this is easy. Nothing about this is
not
clear
supposed to
cut
be.
and linear. And I think there's power in building a community of that vulnerability, because I think social media does this too. You want to be like, everything's great, this is perfect, we're recovered, but no, there's a lot that people deal with, you know, that this adds a whole nother element to. And I think it's important to hold space for them, with that everyone's journey is so unique. And I think because traumatic brain injury is such an invisible injury, it makes it that much harder too. But I think there's power in words, and I think there's power in community, and that's what I hope the resilient brain can do. And just giving people hope, because there's a lot out there and it's scary, and there's not a lot of resources of what does life look like outside of this. I mean, there's great organizations, but making sure they're connected to those. And I think that's why, the foundation that you're running is great, because it's helping build that community, and just having a space of vulnerability, which I think is just as equally important.
Well, I wish I would have waited 2 years to write my book. I was an angry dad, so actually, I'm working on a revision right now.
There's your sequel.
I was mad, dude. I'm still
Yeah.
pissed because I didn't know, and most parents don't. And I
Yeah.
think books like yours can help them understand that this is why waiting or protecting your child's brain is so important. And you're right. You cannot. Kids are kids. they're going to get a concussion. They're going to fall down. I mean, they're children, right? They're going to do it.
Yeah.
But the intentional exposure of these brains is what needs to be stopped in order to protect the child and give them the best future, right? That's what we owe them the best future possible, and I think we can all do a better job with this planet. But that's
and
a
I
whole
really
nother
wish everyone could look at an image of their brain and watch a functional MRI and see their brain working while they're talking, because I think that was my aha moment, and I think it was an aha moment for my husband too. But I think that was my aha moment of, wow, like I'm literally seeing the ripples of your brain. Like I'm literally seeing your brain stem.
What do they call that? Do you know? Because that'd be a great, it'd be a great part of any, physical. It's like, hey, let's look at your brain to get you to understand. Stop damaging this thing, diseasing it, or whatever you're doing with your drugs.
You know what?
Or whatever,
it was literally just part of what we call like a family meeting at the rehab center. So they went through basically all of his imaging, and we went through of like, this is where your injury has happened. Here's your brain bleeds. They were very detailed and kind of building us of like, okay, your frontal lobe was impacted here. Your temporal lobe was here. Here's where your brain bleed was. This is it decreasing over time. And so that was really powerful for us to really just, here are all the facts. Here is where you're at, and here's our plan moving forward. And it was, we had a remarkable medical team. They were beyond incredible. And I think that also helped us know where we're at. And it wasn't a defined like, okay, this is what it is. Because thing with brain injuries, you can't just be marked at, well, this is your injury and this is what it's going to be.
No,
they were really, and I think holding space of medically, this is what this could mean, but let's see how you heal, and let's see how, we're going to keep working on X, Y, and Z. And, my husband had a very customized plan for his rehabilitation. And I think, he got there on Monday, Tuesday morning, he was doing therapies, and they didn't mess around, and they got him working. So,
good,
that was that moment though, where I was like, oh my gosh, like, wow. I mean, seeing his brain, like, it is the most, the only way I can equate it is on when you're seeing your baby on an ultrasound, right? And you're seeing the limbs and them move and them hiccup, it brought me back to those moments when I was pregnant with my children. And it was just as much as remarkable in that moment, because you don't necessarily see that. But that was my aha. And it was a scary time, because you're also seeing, wow, your brain is, whoa, you're seeing the fractures, you're seeing, it's intense, like taking that all in. But for me, that was my powerful moment of, okay, we there are things that we can't fix. You're going to have these fractures, you're going to have this, but what are we going to do to, really work on this and improve what we need to? And that was that meeting will, I think, forever be a moment in our journey where that was the turning point of, okay, we're going to get through this, and we have an incredible team behind us to do that.
And you have an incredible marriage. I mean, you're still together with the kids. That's so amazing, and I'm so thankful that your aha moment, your tenacity, perseverance. I mean, we need our caretakers, man. I mean, we do. I mean, I went through my own issues a couple years ago. We all have them, and if it wasn't for our amazing spouses, not only would we not be here, our marriages, our kids, everything is all tied together. And I think that, your aha moment has absolutely led to a wonderful and healing, not just a book, but where have you taken this? Are you doing anything else in the space right now? Are you,
so
talk to us a little bit about Katianne, right? Where can our audience find you? What do you have going on? Come on, let's brag about Katianne for a bit. What you got?
Which is a very hard thing to do. But no, right now we're working on getting it into rehabilitation hospitals, children's life centers in the hospitals, really connecting with families who are needing a resource, getting it into public libraries, school libraries. And then also right now we're in the process of how to make the book accessible. So we just got the book printed in Braille for those who have visual impairments or who are blind.
Wow.
And then we're going to be working on getting the storybook interpreted in American Sign Language, along with captioning for those who are deaf and hard of hearing. So the special ed teacher in me is like, how do we make sure that everybody, regardless of their disability, can have access to it? So that's kind of the next big journey of what's next for the resilient brain, and just really getting it into the hands as many people as we can, and just building awareness, and also supporting families who are navigating it right now.
Good for you. And, if there's anything we can ever help as a foundation, we definitely like to list your book on our app. We do have an app now in the
Thanks.
Google store called Head Smart, Google and Apple. And we always have links for parents, because if we're not educating ourselves, nobody's going to educate us. And when it comes to the brain, we are, we need education. We need awareness. And books like yours are absolutely going to be part of that and help us lead the way. Miss Olson, I cannot thank you enough for coming on the show. This has been
Thank
an
you.
amazing experience, and man, God bless you and what you're
Thank you.
doing. And I can't wait to read the book. I've got it all printed out right here. I wish you all the best of luck in your journey.
Thank
Please
you.
stay in touch with us, and we will
Yeah.
do everything we can to spread awareness about your wonderful book and
Thank you.
the path that you're taking with your family.
Yeah, and I'd like to close with this, because it's my favorite quote by Maya Angelou, where she said, "Do the best you can until you know better, and then when you know better, do better." And I think that's what our mission, Bruce, you and me, is just, when you know better, you do better. And I think that awareness piece is so crucial. And I'm excited to partner with you and work together, because there's power in numbers together. So I appreciate this opportunity for sure.
Yeah, and you're doing what you can to alleviate pain of others, which is just a gift. And I wish you all the success in your journey. We will be reaching out. Ms. Olson, thank you so much. Another great episode of Broken Brains. And don't forget, folks, you can go online, get your free book, right? And then get Ms. Katianne Olson's book. We're going to be listing that URL on our website. We'll be pushing it out on social media. And Katianne, thank you so much.
Thanks, you too.